Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Graduate Application Camp series by the Education USA. Thank you for joining the session today. I am Jaideep Butch, an Education USA advisor from Education USA Ahmedabad Center. And this is the session in the series of the Graduate Application Camp, which is a series of webinars to help prospective graduate students to understand the component of graduate applications. This series has invited speakers from US universities and alumni to give you the first hand experience and tips which will help you to build an outstanding applications. So, welcome again, all of you. We will begin shortly. Uh, Please introduce yourself by typing in your name in the chat box and also type if you're a student, parent, counselor, and from where you're from. So, the examples are already given here. uh, Please use your headphone for enhanced audio quality. I request all of you to please mute your microphones and keep on a mute during this session to avoid the unnecessary things. You can type your questions in the chat box, and the relevant questions will be answered after the session. You can also check out the resources that is we are going to post it in the chat box during and at the end of the sessions. You can also check the particular link given here on the welcome screen for the Education USA handouts, which is having uh, very informative content about the applications and other relevant informations. Let's begin. Today's session, we are going to discuss on the resume as salient but as silent component on your graduate applications. Uh, I will talk on the importance of the resume and how one should prepare the resume or a CV for the application process. And after my session, the guest speaker, Miss Emily from the Ohio State University, will discuss her part. And after we finish with this session, we will try to answer your questions. Please type in your questions, and relevant questions will be answered after the sessions. Let's begin. Uh, this particular session is a part of the graduate application camp by the Education USA. During this camp, we have organized very informative sessions on the components of the graduate application. After today's session, we will have a last important session left in this series is on 29th September, as you can see on the screen, which is on a funding dilemma. The subject is very appealing, very informative, funding dilemma for graduate programs in the US. So if you are not registered for this particular session, please check the link here and register for that particular session as well. Before we begin, let me introduce the Education USA to all of you. Education USA is a US State Department network of over 430 international students advising network in more than 175 countries and territories. We are here to provide you with the accurate, comprehensive, and current information on the uh, further education process for the USA. We have 7 centers in India, in Ahmedabad, Bengaluru, Chennai, Hyderabad, Kolkata, Mumbai, and New Delhi. We promote US educations to students around the world by offering the accurate, comprehensive informations. Let me introduce to the panelists for today's sessions. As here are the panelists for today's session. And introduced earlier, I am Jaideep, Education USA advisor from Education USA Ahmedabad Center. We welcome today's panelist Emily Betty. Emily is an admission counselor at Ohio State University, USA. Emily, welcome. Welcome from the Education USA. Welcome to the session.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you, Jadip and EdUSA, and everyone for being here this evening. We're very happy to have the opportunity to speak with you.
Welcome, Emily. So
Thank you.
let's begin. Uh, when you apply to a US university for your master's graduate program, fine, you definitely need a resume or a CV, and why you need that, fine. A need of resume or CV and why you need that. Why your graduate program asks you to submit the resume or CV along with the other regular application material. This is because they want more information that is not included in the application. Fine. And focuses on what they need to know to better evaluate your candidacy. Including a resume in your college application is advantageous for two reasons. Instead of providing a list of extracurricular activities, achievements, and leadership roles, you should provide the admission team with a story through your resume. So this is the best reason that you can tell your story through resume. When you start applying to university for further education in the United States, CV and resume are sometimes used interchangeably. If you are not sure which kind of documents to submit, it is better to ask for clarification. Generally, the submission of resume or CV is it is to know you better, fine, over and above your normal academic documents and other documents, reference letters and statement of purpose that you submit. Fine. The difference between CV and resume, normally both contains a history of your major activities, but the main difference between CV and resume is that a CV uh, focuses on your educational history, and a resume focuses on achievements in your professional career. A CV is comprehensive document that details accomplishments, awards, honors, and publications in an academic focus. As you can see, we have outlined that CV is detail of your academic accomplishments, is a synopsis of your educational and academic background, and is normally longer than the resume. Resume is heavily focused on professional achievements primarily, and the work history is given on the resume, and it's primarily a one page summary of your work experience and background. When you start applying to university for further education, the CV and resume, the CV presents a full history of your academic credentials, so the length of the document is variable. Emphasis on the academic accomplishments on the CV. You should always begin with education and can include name of the advisors and dissertations, titles, or summary. Length of the CV is depends upon experience and includes a complete list of publications, posters, and presentations. In the resume, it presents a concise picture of your skills and qualifications for specific positions. So lengths need to be shorter and dictated by years of experience, generally 1 or 2 pages. It is no longer than 2 pages with an additional page for publications and or poster presentations if highly relevant for the application requirement. After say about a 1 year of industry experience, you should put your industry experience on the top of your resume and place the education section at the end or near the end depending upon your qualifications. So this is the mainly the difference between CV and resume, right? Don't confuse yourself with the resume. Fine. Both basically the resume is to get you an interview and enhance your application to a school and provide yet another opportunity to sell yourself. Of course, for the job resume, you need to give synopsis of the most relevant professional experience you have for the particular position for which you are applying. If your resume is crafted well, then it enhances your chances to get an interview. Whereas in an application resume, if you're applying to US university for the master's or PhD programs, then in an application resume, you need to give more detailed synopsis of your experiences. It is a comprehensive record of all your professional activities, including education, teaching, publications, awards, and others. If crafted well in order, it will enhances your application to a school and provide yet another opportunity to sell yourself. University, the officials looking for resume will definitely impressed, and your very good presented resume will give you a chance for an admission. Similarity between application CV and application resume. It should be crisp. The language should be quite crisp. Use action verbs to describe your experiences. We will put some link over here in order to find out the action verbs which you should choose in your resume. Fine. A crisp resume is always the best way to impress university officials. They hardly have less than a few minutes to go through your resume. During the selection process, always go for a one-page resume which is written in a crisp language. Your resume should be, with a clean layout. Use lots of white spaces, so it should not be messy. So it should be very easy to read for the admission officer. And of course, there should be no mistakes, no typos, no grammatical errors. So suggestion is check many times before you submit to the admission department. Check resume, check thoroughly, check for even the smallest mistakes, fine, which easily can go unnoticed, but you should check thoroughly. You can ask some senior to check for it for yourself and then only submit a crisp, clean, and without mistakes resume to the admission department in order to enhance your chances. What makes an application resume noticeable? Why and how university will give a weightage to your resume over and above other candidate? Fine. Uh, of course, it is not limited to one page in length. Fine. Two pages fine. Through contact information must be on both the pages. Great school programs accept resumes that are multiple pages. This gives you a more freedom to include other experiences, such as internships and volunteer work, since you are not restricted to one page and you are not applying for job. So you have a little bit liberty over there for an application resume. Separates your work and non-work experience into different sections. You are applying to an educational program, so it makes sense that your grade school resume will focus more on education than a standard work resume. In a work resume, you would usually only devote a line or two to education to explain where you went to school and what degree uh, you received. But your graduate school resume should include more information, such as your grade point average, the title of your undergraduate thesis, if you have completed one, any awards you have received, classes you took that are relevant to the program you are applying to, as well as relevant skills you learned in the school. Some grade schools will specify what education information they would like you to include in your resume. But in general, you want your resume to give them a good idea of your academic achievements and why they qualify you for the program. So include all your experiences, not just the ones targeting a specific job. You're applying for a graduate program. So whatever your life skills, whatever your learning experience, please try to add into resume. Indicate amount of time, that is per week, per month, that you've committed to different experiences. While applying for a graduate program, most universities allow and encourage you to include internships and volunteer work on your resume. Why? This can be a great benefit because you can often gain important skills and experience at these places. Even if you weren't paid or working there full time, it can be particularly useful for younger people applying to a grad school who may not have had a lot of paid jobs yet to include on their resume. Fine. So go ahead and include all those great internships and volunteer experience you had on your grad school's resume. Don't shy. Fine. Even if that particular experience, you are thinking that it's not a significant value because you have not devoted much time or you have not got paid for it. But the experience, the learning experience and learning outcome is quite good, please better add into your resume. You never know, the university official will look into this particular experience as a positive effect. Fine. So and of course the references, the great references makes your application resume quite noticeable. References, and in some cases portfolios or transcripts, can be listed as available upon request if you have enough room at the bottom of the resume. Employers know that university officials know that they can request this information, so it is not necessary to include. But normally during the application process, you have to add your recommenders to a different sections. So if you don't want to put here, that is also fine, but other references you can put over here. You should have a separate reference page. You can have a separate reference page, fine. And generally this page will have same heading as the resume, and it will list the name, title, the business mailing address and everything of your reference, fine. So these things make an application resume quite noticeable, quite appealing to the admission department, the officer or a faculty concerned who are looking for your applications along with the other material, fine. uh, Categorizing your resumes into these things, fine. The objective of your resume in a very short sentence, you have to put your objectives, that why you are giving resume to the department. Give your resume a focus, tailor it to the positions, programs that you are applying for. Usually a single phrase expressing the specific type major that you're applying for and you are seeking, and specific skills or abilities that you want to use for this successful review. So objective should be very clear and should align with the program, the major, and the skills that you have listed on the resume should align with all these things, fine. After that, education, which includes any online in-person studies, research, conferences, presentations, publications, anything, fine. List in reverse chronological order with the highest degree or education the first. Include university, college, school name and location, the degree that you earned, the date of graduation or expected date of graduation, the major that you have completed, and related coursework, and the possibly the graduate point average. You may also include honors, awards, scholarships, dissertation, and thesis topics. Fine. A list of licenses earned, any kind of membership or training courses you have, or training certificates you have. You can also add into your resume. Academic experiences highlights 2 or 3 upper level courses that you provides. Fine. Any volunteer experience, a community experience, any extracurricular involvement, any activity which has shaped up your skills, leaderships, leadership skills or time management skills, etc. During your college days, you have participated in an activity which test your leadership skills, which tested your time management skills. Please add those things. Please add successful outcomes. Fine. Describe your duties, responsibilities, and accomplishments using short and powerful phrases, beginning with action verbs. Fine. Quantify and qualify data with specific details and statistics whenever possible. Fine. List out extracurricular activities and skills, include computer skills and foreign language skills if you have any. Foreign language skills, if you have, please add those skills in your resume without fail. It is a much, say, very important factor in your applications. If you know more than your native language, and other than, English and your native language, any other foreign language like Russian, Chinese, French, any other language that you know, it's a great asset for you while you're on campus in the USA. Fine. Plus, if you have a great programming skills, please add those into your resume. If you have any other skills, Any special skills, please don't forget to mention those skills. Fine. You can also add your unique experiences, such as travel to a foreign country or study abroad. Yes, of course, in a one line. That will be an asset, a great category to add into your resume. Uh, I think I'll now hand over the presentation to Emily, and she will discuss the how to prepare your resume or CV for a graduate school. Emily, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jaideep, and thank you again to EducationUSA Ahmedabad for hosting and allowing us to be a part of today's presentation.
Thank you. So I'm stopping my screen, and you may
Okay.
start from the yeah.
Okay. Um, okay, can you see the screen? Okay.
You need to run your presentation, Emily.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I thought I was on the R page.
Okay. We can see on your Zoom screen, but we need to
Yes.
see. Yeah,
Okay. I'll just pull up from my presentation, if that's okay.
yeah, that's fine.
So sorry. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. So again, thank you for hosting us today. And so I'm going to talk a moment. Uh, Really, I'll be mentioning some things that JDeep has as well, but hopefully to give you some more perspective from the university. Um, uh, viewpoint of this. And just to give you a little bit of background, I have been in international admissions for almost 10 years, but 2 of those years were spent on the program side, sitting with faculty and professors making decisions on graduate applications. So my hope today is that we can give you some more insight from the perspective of a US institution and answer questions you have. So first things first, a lot of what Jaydeep was talking about, when you're applying to graduate school, to a master's program, PhD program, of course, speaking to your education experience is a huge part of this, and how you present it, how clear and focused you make your experience thus far, is very important on your resume or CV. So, of course, you're wanting to take the time, and I'll show examples towards the end of the presentation, but you're wanting really to take the time to list out every institution you've attended since after you've left high school or secondary school. You want to be sure to list all of that, the years attended. If anything's in progress, of course, you still want to make that known. And any study, whether it was maybe a semester abroad in another country, anything that was significant and impacting and a part of your grades and towards your degree or degrees that you've earned, you want to be sure to list that out, including things like internships, which JD mentioned as well. It's huge for programs that you're applying to see what experience you've done, not just where you've attended and what degree that you have, or you're going to have a bachelor's, you have a master's, but what did you do along the way that sets you apart from other students that attended the same institution? What type of unique internships or experiences have you had in the field, or maybe even in a related field that would help enhance your experience in their program? And then, of course, certificates, any certificates you've picked up along the way. So maybe you graduated with your bachelor's degree 10, 12 years ago, and you've been working in your profession, but you've obtained a certificate or a licensure along the way. You want to be sure to include that, to let them know that you have been an active student, maybe not at a university per se, but even in your field, your line of work and study. And then volunteer work, of course, this is an opportunity for you to share experience. And this kind of ties in with relevant work experience. If you're applying, let's say, for MBA or something like this, and you're working as an accountant or something like that, there can be very relevant work experience, but maybe you're doing volunteer work in a completely different area, or you're someone who's active in your community and you're giving back, you're visiting the hospital, you're helping in other ways in your community. These are all this all becomes relevant to your resume because it's influenced who you are and shows you as a someone who serves and gives back to others, and that is something that is important when you're going into a graduate program. They faculty, professors, they want to see that you're a well-rounded individual, but also you're not just wanting to continue your study, but you're looking for ways to give back, and you can enhance their program in that way. Of course, you want to mention the professional and relevant skills that you have. Um, and of course, any experience you have. And again, JD mentioned this, but if there's experience you've had with software programs or systems that may even seem common in your line of work, that all is still very important because for these faculty, for them to know, excuse me, for them to know that you already have experience, say, in this type of computer system or something, if you're applying to a computer science program, that's going to be huge to know that you're coming with that background and experience. Maybe that's not something they can teach you, have to teach you, and you can excel from there. And then, of course, awards, scholarships, any funding you've received so far, maybe in previous study, maybe through your job, or even through your community. Maybe you won a local award or scholarship that you want to speak to. These are all ways to enhance and show that you are an active learner of your field of life, and that you are bringing that experience and that expertise that you're gaining, the skills and knowledge that you're gaining to the program to which you're applying. So when you are sitting down and you're developing or writing your resume or your CV, there are some things to consider. And the first thing really is considering your audience, consider who you're writing to. So unlike when you may have applied for a job, or maybe you've already developed a resume for a job, this might be a good time to kind of sit down, and maybe that's an outline that you have, but you want to think about, if I'm applying to graduate school, if I'm applying to this program, who's going to be reading this? How are they looking at it in the midst of maybe hundreds of other, maybe even 1,000 or more other applications for their program? And maybe the admissions office, how is everyone on that side looking at it, and how can I make the most of this opportunity of submitting a resume or CV in a way that will help and further my education? So you really want to think about who will be reading your resume or CV. Usually front of the line would be staff such as myself, admissions officers or advisors. And at the graduate level in US institutions, usually it is, in my experience, it's usually always the graduate program to which you're applying that makes the ultimate decision of admission. Um, and I'll talk a little bit about a graduate school as well, that decision might get filtered through, but usually that is always with the program. But your first line, you're usually working with admissions officers or advisors or admissions counselors. They are usually taking that documentation for you, completing checklists, completing that part of your application. And at some institutions, they are the first line that reads that, reviews it, and may send it on to the program, or if it doesn't meet certain criteria, maybe it's held in a queue. So it is important to think about, am I meeting the criteria that is set out by the program, or that's clearly set on that university's website when I'm applying? You also want to think about, of course, faculty and instructors. That's what we've been talking about. Usually there is a committee made up of faculty, instructors, professors that will read through this. And like JD said, usually they don't have a lot of time They're usually looking at hundreds of applications, within a month's time or so. Their committee, I'll share a little bit of experience I've had from the program side. The committee took about, over the span of 2 months, would meet several times through the week, and faculty, professors were looking very closely at each application. But because there were so many, they were looking for these resumes that were very clean looking, easy to read, easy to note the accomplishments, the education, the experience. It came to them easily across the page, and things that stood out. They're looking at that extra experience, the publications that you've done, research, maybe unique volunteer work that speaks to your experience. So they are often, the ones saying yes or no to admission. So it's always a good idea to keep that in mind when you're writing your resume, when you're writing your CV, which we'll get to in a moment. The program might be asking for one or the other, or they'll use it interchangeably. But you want to keep this in mind. How can I kind of, in a way, how do I impress them? How do I show what work I've done in a very clear and concise manner? Researchers, so there are times where, especially if you're applying maybe in a science related field, physics, biology, something like that, they may also have student researchers or current graduate students that are in their last year of study. They may have them also helping look at your resume or CV. So you want to think about, if you're in that field, what are publications or things or work that you've done, and how you can write that in a way that's going to catch their eye. Program coordinators or program directors can also be leading the admissions effort in a program, and they, like faculty and instructors, they may also be the ones heavily reviewing the application, the resume or CV, and sending it on for review, for approval to admit or not admit. And then the graduate school or a graduate office, a lot of US institutions are set up in such a way that there's one graduate school or hub where all of these academic programs get their final approval or put in their request for admission for students with a graduate school or office, and then they may handle sending out your admissions decision as well. But usually these graduate schools will have information about funding. They may even have examples of what they're looking for. If you're wanting to be considered for scholarships or things like this, what should that resume or CV look like? So think about all the players involved in reading your resume or CV when you're writing it. You're not writing it for a future boss or supervisor. You're writing it for those that may help you continue your education. And then something else to consider is, how does your education and experience tie in? So you want to be sure to include skills which display a strong fit. Again, we had talked about maybe you're a computer programmer and there's a software you're very familiar with, or a couple of softwares that you've worked in. You want to be sure to share those. Or maybe you're an artist and there's some events that you've been a part of to show your work or something like this. You want to be sure to include those in your experience or where you volunteered. You also want to exhibit experience which shows how you can contribute. And I have heard this from the program side, that they're not just always looking for the way that you could be a good fit, a strong fit for their program, is not just that you meet all the criteria and should be considered for admission, but you display skills, abilities through your resume and CV and other parts of your application that show them you are someone that will give back as well into their program. So maybe you'll be a student leader of sorts. Maybe you'll be able to help other graduate students in their program, or even undergraduate students in their program as a teaching assistant or something like this. So they're looking for ways that to build their program to everyone's an effort that will help everyone. And then something to consider is standing apart. And I know this is talked about a lot whenever you're applying for admission somewhere, how to make your application unique from others. It's the same way when we're developing a resume, maybe for a job. We're competing against so many other people for a position. How are we different? So be sure to speak to maybe unique extracurricular activities, and they may not, you want to be sure that it meets professional guidelines and everything, but it may not be exactly related to business or related to engineering or medicine or the field that you're considering. But it may be that you won a tennis match, a local, or something that's a big deal in your area, or you're a musician and you've played in certain venues. These are extracurriculars that display leadership in their own right, and show that you have talents and abilities and critical skills or analytical skills. And a lot of times those do tie over in the way that you are as a student, in the way that you study or perform research. So think about those things too, that you think, oh, maybe those don't directly tie in. They could help build your resume or CV. Of course, you don't always want to take up half a page or something on that. That may just be something towards the end that you mentioned, but you want to keep all of those types of things in mind. And then any accomplishments that speak to you being a well-rounded candidate, of course, in the variety of skills that you have, you want to definitely bring that to the table. And what universities are looking for, again, that concise, well-organized, and proofread CV or resume. Um, they are typically, programs are looking at many of these at one time. So a lot of times, let's see, it's towards the end of September. Applications are open for next autumn 2021 in most cases, and students are already applying. Students are even applying for this coming spring semester. And usually once there's an application deadline in most cases, once that closes and all the applications are starting to be viewed by the program, that is when they've gathered all the documentation. So they have a lot of work to do, and yours being, accurate, not having mistakes, things like that, it does stand out, and it does show that you care and are concerned, and you pay attention to detail, which is important. And Jay Deep had mentioned this, but I think if you have a friend or someone that would be willing to even look over it to catch any mistakes you might not see, that's always a good idea. You want it to be clearly read, and at the same time, you want it to truly give a full snapshot of your education, experience, and talents. Make sure you're not missing anything big that could be impacting to your application. And something I think that's very important to point out from the university side is this should be a document that works with your statement of purpose. A lot of graduate programs will ask for some sort of statement of purpose, or it might be slightly worded different, but they want you to take a page or two and speak to why you're why you're applying, what you hope to gain, what you hope to give back. And there have been times where students were either putting too much into the CV or resume, and then just sort of the same thing in their statement of purpose, or they really weren't distinguishing between the two. But if you set up and frame your experience well in the resume or CV, it will tie hand in hand and then allow you to speak more in depth about some of those really critical pieces of your experience and your statement of purpose. So your resume or CV is very important to write, and you want to be strategic about it because it is a very good, strong foundation and framework for your experience. You're going to fill out a application with your institution, and it's going to have a lot of the information. It's going to ask for education, your volunteer work, all of these things. But when the programs truly go to review the documents, they're looking not just at the application details, they're looking at what pages you submit. And so when your resume and your CV are very clearly organized, and it provides that framework, and then you can go off of it to write a very strong statement of purpose. That stands out as a very strong candidate that not only knows what they want to do academically and has a focus, but they know how to achieve their goals, and they know how to meet the criteria the program has set even for admission. So they will probably do well and meet the criteria for the academic rigor in their program. And that brings me to the last point. It should meet the set admission criteria. So we've talked a little bit about the differences between resume and CV. If it's asking for a resume, you want to provide that page. If it's asking for a CV specifically, especially with US institutions, if they are asking for the CV, they truly want you to have that detailed CV with all the education, research, publications. They want you to list all of that in 2 pages. So just kind of look and see. And a lot of programs, at least I'll say for Ohio State, a lot of our programs will maybe even have a blurb underneath that resume or CV requirements speaking to what they want you to be sure to include. So make sure before you submit anything that you have looked at the university's program's website and you're meeting the criteria that they're asking for. And then very quickly, I'm sorry, I don't want to take too much time, but if you have questions, and I'm putting Ohio State's information here, but truly the best place whenever I'm talking to graduate students is always to consider. I always ask them, have you been to the website? Not because I don't want to share the information and details. We know this, we help students daily with it, but it is so important to go to a university's website and look in detail at what their program's doing. Don't just look at the admissions criteria page, but look at what's the current research that their graduate students are doing. Who are the professors, and look at each, what work have they done. A lot of the professors will have a page and talk about their experience and educational background. And why do you think this is all a good fit for you? Start to formulate and think about that. Because if you do that research and it's not a good fit, then that kind of lets you know, oh, maybe I should look at some other universities' websites and see if I'm having a different experience, because maybe that institution is not the best fit for what you want to do or achieve academically. So our page, Graduate Professional Admissions, you have the option to search kind of any term or name of an academic area, and it will bring up everything related. Here, I just pulled up the example of computer science and engineering. It's one of our popular programs, but you'll see we have a breakdown of the costs, funding, criteria, and the link to apply on the left. And then on the right side, it has the program information, a link to email them and a link to their website. It's very important if you have questions about how to formulate the resume or CV, it's always a good idea to reach out to the admissions department or graduate school of a university, but you can also reach out to the program directly. It allows you to kind of introduce yourself and make them aware that you are a thoughtful student wanting to meet, provide what they're asking for. But of course, with questions too, you also want to balance that with making sure they're not providing the answers already on the website. So again, always a good idea to visit the website. And ultimately, you don't just want to be listing out your experience, but tell how your experience correlates to the program that you're applying to. And really the resume, it's been said that it is a reflection of you, and it truly is. It lets a program or a university see that you're polished and detailed, and they really want to understand your background and what you're like, what experiences you have had, and your resume CV gives you that opportunity to show them that in just a few minutes. You can clearly demonstrate that. So it does tell your story, as JD had mentioned, and you want them to know your story and know about you. So just very briefly, I want to show you, this is a resume example. And you can look again to the program if they're saying they want a resume or CV. A lot of programs will generally just say resume, and they mean typically just they want your experience so far. So if you've only been, I shouldn't say only, but if you don't have work experience, you're maybe completing your bachelor's and hope to go directly to your master's, that's okay. On your resume or CV, you're just going to speak to your education experience, internships, publications, and these types of things. You can see here, and for time's sake, maybe I won't go into detail about all of it, but you can view here, education is always going first after you've put your name and information, of course, at the top. Education is always the first thing, and you're going to start with that before moving on to your other experiences. So where you're currently studying, and then under that, you can put other places you've attended. If you've done a study abroad experience, an internship, or maybe you've been a student worker at your institution, you can speak to that work. And then this student is applying to communication. So under even education experience, they've put communications experience to allow the program to which they're applying know, hey, this is, very specific work that I've done, or experience I have in this area. And then they've have administrative experience, and then their skills at the bottom. So, and I'm sorry, I went too fast. You'll see at the bottom, Microsoft Office Suite, Adobe Photoshop, Constant Contact. These are skills speaking to that area to which they're applying that may be helpful. And then they're proficient in Spanish. Like JD said, having language experience outside of English is very helpful, useful, and helps your resume a lot, or your CV. Just be sure that you put your level of that. So typically you don't want to put it on your resume unless you are proficient or pretty strong and can carry on a conversation in that language. And then a CV example, you'll see instead of just the one page concise on a resume, if you're asked to write a CV and speak more to your specific experience as a student, you start again with the education background, where you're attending on the left, this if Richard Smith attending Harvard, and then going into the research work experience. And you can usually, this is where a lot of that has been done at your university or institution or other universities. And then under that, he's listing his publications. And using citations for all publications is important, especially if you're going into a science-related field. I will say I've seen this in physics. It was very important for the faculty reviewing and reading student applications to see that students had completed publications. So take a look at what you've done. Maybe it's been a few years since you were in school. Try to go back to your work and what you did, and list all of that relevant experience. Honors and awards are on the next page, especially anything that stands out within your country or your specific region or city. That's a very high honor, something like that. Or maybe it's even a local award or something you won at your university. You want to, if you've made the dean's list, things like that you want to include. And then the leadership activities, of course. This is a good idea to include that on your CV. And then this student has teaching experience, so they're putting that. If you have, even as JD said, even work that you're not being paid for, but maybe you've taught a course at your university, or you've worked with a professor or someone there, that all speaks to your experience in the field and learning from someone, or maybe being mentored by someone. And I just want to point out before I finish here, you may see that there are headings here: education, research work experience, honors and awards. These are all ones that you definitely want to include, but if some of your experience or works falls under something slightly different, it is okay to make another heading to make room for your specific experience. And with that, I'll turn it back to JG. I think I already went over my time a bit, but I wanted to thank you all for your attention to the presentation. And I've also provided our admissions email as well as my email. I'm Emily Beatty. .222, and then encourage you, if you get some time and would like to visit our website, you're welcome as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And I'm sharing my screen, and then we will discuss the question and answer session after a while, Emily. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Uh, uh, Thanks so much, Emily. You have very rightly mentioned all the points. Many students feel confused about preparation of CV or resume, and what to submit and how to submit and what to include, what not to include, and many things. And you throw light on this very important topic, because sometimes the graduate applications, the resume is very important factor, and particularly if you're applying for research program, doctoral programs, or programs which needs a thesis, or some kind of work experience. The resume will be quite a vital part of your applications. So thank you again. Before we start with the question and answer session, I would like to inform all of the participants here that how can you connect with the Education USA. So Education USA, as I informed earlier, is a U.S. State Department supported network. We have a as a main point of contact, because mobile is in your hand. You can use the Education USA India mobile app. It is available on the Android Google Play Store, as well as the Apple Store, and the uh, chatbot is available, which will give you the answer of the basic questions, and it will give you the timeline of the studying in the United States. Plus, the applications will give you the contact details of the centers, the centers around you. Fine, and you can find many more resources on the mobile app. So I request all of you to download this mobile applications, which is a very helpful resource for all of you if you are thinking about studying further in the United States. Uh, Education USA India offers lots of services to the students, and due to current situation of the ongoing pandemic and work from home situations, Education USA comes up with the virtual sessions. You can sign up to get an Education USA update by checking this link, clicking this link. Fine. Also, you can explore our calendar of events. You can also reach out to us through this toll-free number, which is 18 001031. We are available Monday to Friday, 10 to between 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. There will be free virtual sessions on your 5 steps to US study from Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3:30 p.m. and Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday at 11:30 at the morning sessions. Free virtual specialized information sessions on admissions and applications processes with the US university representatives that we organize. You can take participate in. Our presence is available on all social media platforms. Facebook chat available with the Education USA advisor. So kindly follow the Facebook Education USA India page and sign up for the updates. You can also follow us on the Twitter and Instagram, and our handle is given over here. The information of our channel, or the YouTube channel, also given over here. This particular session is now live on the YouTube and Facebook, and it will be available in our video under the playlist for a future reference. So you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, uh, and also subscribe to our education Facebook videos. Fine. We also offer the individual advising memberships. So if you want our guidance throughout the process, you can reach out to us through, contact us, and we'll be very happy to provide you with the advising for the US higher educations. uh, I would like to announce here the mega event that Education USA is coming up with. It is US University Virtual Fair of 2020. We invite you to join the biggest Education USA virtual fair. This virtual fair is your chance to interact with more than 100 reputed US universities, offering a wide array of the graduate programs, masters, and PhD programs. All this from a comfort and safety from your home. Fine, it's a virtual fair, and you can join from anywhere. Highlight of this fair is you can have a chat with one-to-one with the US university representatives and get your question answered on the program, application process, financial aid, and any other requirements of the university. You can download the latest brochures and course descriptions of universities at your convenience during the fair. Sorry, during the fair, you can interact with the Education USA India advisors and US Department of State network of advising centers that provide accurate, comprehensive information. Of course, you can chat with us at that time. You can meet with the testing organizations and discuss your the latest update on testings and the test you are supposed to take, like GRE, TOEFL, and so on. You can attend a useful and engaging sessions on various aspects of applications, admissions, and students visa process. So date and time is for the graduate virtual fair is Friday, October 2nd and Saturday, October 3rd. I'll be putting a link over here for you to easily register by clicking on that link. Time is 5:30 to 10:30 p.m. Fine. Uh, with this, Emily, we are moving ahead with the question and answer sessions. So the first question I have is from just a minute. Okay. A question from Tanveer. If one can't possibly add all the essential details in 1 or 2 pages, what's your advice, Emily?
I'm sorry, it cut out a minute. Can you repeat the question? So
Oh, okay.
sorry.
Okay, of course.
Yeah.
If one can't possibly add all the essential details in 1 or 2 pages, so
Oh,
what
okay. Yes.
he or she should do? I mean, the editing, but how much?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Great question. And I honestly have run into this myself. When you're applying and you want to be sure to include all your relevant experience, but you are working kind of within this limited space. So, what I would say to that is if it is a CV, I think if you need to go, um, to a little bit part of a third page, I think that can be okay. And a resume, it, I've even seen where it goes a little bit to a second page. Again, not for a resume, not a full second page, and for CV, not a full third page, but maybe it's just a few more, like a size of a half the size of a paragraph, even. Um, I think that would be okay to make sure you're getting in the relevant experience, but do make sure that you're going back through. A lot of times, it's a good idea to write out everything, but then to go back and edit it a few times. So the first resume or CV you create should not be the first one that you're submitting, right? It's going to first you write a few drafts, and then it is your final draft that's been proofread and made to be more concise and clear that you're submitting. So I would stress that you really try to cut it down if possible. Um, if at all possible, to stay within those kind of understood guidelines, and also review the program to which you're applying, review their website, because some are very specific that they want a one-page resume. And when they are very specific like that, that means if they see 2 pages, um, it looks like you may not be following the directions. Um, that's not for every program, but make sure you review and make sure they don't have a strict policy about this. But I think in most cases, as long as they're not saying it's a strict guideline, if you need to go a little bit into the next page to show your complete snapshot, that should be fine. But all in all, make sure that you're really combing through, making it clear and concise, and only doing that if you must.
Okay, so it means it's always advisable to stick to the limit. Read the
Yes.
admission. Yeah, read the
Yeah.
admission department's instructions on how to submit the resume and what is the word limit or what is the page limit. Fine. So it's
Yeah, and
generally, yeah, please.
yes, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to add from faculty or professor standpoint as well, a lot of them have years of experience, and sometimes I think it can be uh, they may take it wrong a little bit if they see, you've written 6 pages for your resume or CV, and it's like, oh wow, I've had 30 more years experience than them, and I would not write this long of a document. So keep all of that in perspective as well.
Okay. And of course, this is a question from my side, not from the participants, which is, of course, in continuation of this question. Can we submit a longer resume or a CV, whatever the case may be, uh, after submitting on an online by default portal? Can we submit an extension of that resume to the professor we are reaching out to, or a faculty we're reaching out to separately on the personal email ID? I mean, official email ID. Uh,
Sure. Great question. I think that can be appropriate if you've been in contact with that faculty member. Maybe it's someone that you're wanting to continue your research with at that institution. And there'll be times where you have that exchange. You may even, um, Skype or have some phone conversations or emails back and forth with that faculty. I think it can become appropriate to attach and let them know, I'm uploading my CV or resume with my application, but I just wanted to provide you with this extra page of some additional experience I have. And also, I would add your application, the actual application you submit is a good time where it once you, if there's a space to list for experience or something like that, usually that's where you can add some of those extra details that maybe you didn't have space for on your CV or resume. So it's good to have your CV or resume also prepared prior to submitting your application if you can.
okay, so the piece of advice that if you want to submit a longer resume, then please be in touch with your faculty or, I mean, the advisor. If probably he will look into the longer details. Okay, the second question again from Srishti Suresh. Do we include the online courses we have completed that are relevant to the courses we are applying for? You already have answered, and I already have answered. But still, I mean, it is an important, at particular this point of time, that students are learning online. And if the learning outcome is quite good, they can definitely add this into the resume. Your, I mean, your suggestions, Emily.
Yes, so you're talking about extra certificates or study
E-
that is done along the way, correct?
that is I understand from the question.
Okay. Yes, I think that's very important because it shows that you're a lifelong learner, and I think that is key to looking at any prospective student. Are they someone that is open to learning and experiences, and maybe they just didn't go to school and then they got a job, but they've continued to try to better themselves along the way and to gain more skills and to excel in their job and their work and their understanding. I think that's very important.
Great. So whatever you are learning, if it is relevant to your program, if it is relevant to your applications, then please try to highlight in your resume. Okay. And the question again: how much duration long training experiences is recommended to add? Is there any specific? There is no specification, but still, Betty.
Okay. So if I'm understanding you, how long should you be in an experience to share it?
Yes, yes. How much duration long training experience is recommended
Okay.
to add?
Yeah, I think it has more to do with what the experience it is than the length of time.
Yes,
So maybe the example I can think of is a study abroad experience. You went to the UK for a month and it was a few weeks internship that you completed. Um, maybe it wasn't a full year of study, but I'm sure the experience you gained um, traveling, working with others in a foreign country, and all the experience you gained from that work. Maybe it wasn't even specific to what you're going to study, but just the all the life experience you learned. I think that's important to include. So it's more about what the experience or learning experience was rather than the length of time.
Definitely. So it's not about just the time you spent on the experience, but the outcome and how you put it concisely on a resume. That makes all the difference. Question from Nandita Nair is: if you don't have any work or research experience, now this is a question from many students, I suppose, particularly at this point of time, because since about last 6 months, people are at home and studying from home. The work or research, no work or research experience, what can you include in the resume to make it stand out if it is a compulsory requirement then?
Sure, and that is a great question. With the current world and state of things, I think even maybe plans that a lot of people had in place may have fell through. So maybe you were going to study abroad already, or you did have an internship set up locally that you didn't have the opportunity to now. I would say this is where it's important to think creatively and to really consider. What you've done. So maybe you do not have work experience, but maybe you have been working, and your job does have skills that you should list, and work that you've done, because it is work that can be um, that has enhanced your ability to learn, and does will kind of in a way correlate to your study. Or maybe you if you don't have research, you should think more about what leadership work you've done, what type of volunteer work you've done, any presentations that you may have done. So maybe you don't have a formal publication, but have you talked to anyone about your research or your work? And I would say right now it's important to look for those opportunities. So if you don't have them yet, um, what are ways that you could get involved even in the next few weeks in your local community? Even things like working at a shelter, serving meals once a week or something. This is showing your engagement with your local community and those in need. Um, and maybe, again, maybe you do some volunteer work at an office somewhere, and you're filing paperwork or things like this. But it allows you and gives you the opportunity to work with other people. And a lot of times that is a skill as well that you need in graduate school. You're going to be presenting and doing group work, sometimes with your peers in courses, or presenting to your class. And all of that speaks to your experience and how you'll be a student there at the institution.
Okay, Millie. And I am not sure how to put this question. This is again from my side. When students has submitted the applications along with his final resume, and after that he has some very nice works experience between the submission of application and getting the admissions, is it how, I mean, it is difficult to again submit the resume, but how can he reach out in any way to the admission officer or
Yeah.
someone concerned at the university?
Yeah, great question. And this does happen pretty often. So if you have an experience that you didn't start at the time that you applied and submitted the documents, you, in most cases, are more than welcome to submit an updated resume or CV. What I encourage students in this case, they'll email me, which is great. You should start always with the admissions office in most cases. Um, Email and explain the situation. We can get it added to your record, or if it's a system where you can upload it yourself, still let the admissions office know. And I encourage the student to let the program know. This is a great and perfect opportunity and reason to reach out to the program directly, introduce yourself, and, oh, I've gained some additional experience and here it is. And I've already sent it to the admissions office to add to my record, but I want to make sure you have it. And I received that when I was on the program side. And I think it speaks to an active learner and participant, but someone that's also covering, they're being very conscientious to follow up with the admissions office, but also let us know so that if the program is already reviewing cases or files, they'll have that as soon as possible. Great
Okay, so
question.
yeah, so what I understand from your answer is, can I mean it is possible for someone to tell the admission officer or the university in general in the application process that I'm going to engage after this particular date for this particular activity, and before I get admit, I will have this much of experience, and this will be the
Yes.
outcome.
Yes. So if it's as you're applying, there is usually a space to speak to experiences or volunteer work or things like that that you're going to complete, and you would just simply put the date. So if you're applying in September, but you won't be completing this until October, November 2020, you would just list the date. Then a lot of times when you're listing your experience, you also list the date. So that would just kind of be a future date. Or, like I said, if you feel more comfortable, only including what you have 100% already completed or is currently in progress, you can always follow it up with an email to the program and say, and to admissions, I will be completing this. I have not included it on my resume because it's not in progress or completed, but I will be taking part in this experience in this month and this year. And then that allows them to kind of add that to your record and file if you're not able to add it to the application.
Emily, thanks to know the doors will not be closed after you submit your application. Still have a chance to interact and
Sure,
submit your
yes.
work. Yeah. So
Yes.
the next question is for PhD programs, should we contact the potential advisors or should we not before applying? And the addition to this is my question that should we ask if we have to, then should we ask what should we submit in the resume?
Great question. So I always encourage prospective graduate students to reach out to the program. Like I said, it's a good idea to have done your research and looked at the website and have an idea already of how their particular program works. But it is very good to reach out to them, ask questions that you have. And if you need to know about something specific or if it should be included in your resume or CV, that's a good time to ask them. Um, Things that students usually ask about as well, or they ask about funding opportunities, what they are looking for in a candidate, um, and if there's any courses they could be taking in the meantime to help support their application. But it's always a good idea to reach out to the program, and you can always ask them about their admission criteria.
Yeah. So since you want to apply for a PhD program, the advisor or the faculty will give you the more clear picture about the program and the process
Yes.
if you contact them early before applying. Yeah. Uh, the next question is: do we need to attach certificate, experience letter for our work experience too? How one can convince if he has written in the resume about the particular work experience, but in order to prove that, do university needs something from the third party where he is working or something like that, employer or someone?
Okay, good question. In most cases, a letter like that is not needed. If you are listing the education or the work experience on your resume, um, we have this at the end of our application before you submit it, and I think a lot of institutions do. You do sign that you are providing the most truthful information. So at this point, it is expected that you're not falsifying any information or embellishing any information about your experience. So typically, a letter from an employer or professor in that way is not needed, but most graduate programs will ask for references, and this is a letter usually that may come from a faculty member that knows of your experience at your current institution or previous school, and or a supervisor, or from speaking to your work experience. So in that instance, letters may be required, and you should look again at that program's criteria. Are they asking for faculty-only references? Do they allow you to have one from a job or a supervisor? But in most cases, there's not documentation needing to prove that what's on your resume or CV is true. Some of our professional programs, I can think about dentistry, for example, there are a certain amount of hours that you're supposed to complete as a prerequisite. And this does need signed off by the doctor that you work with. So sometimes with that level of program, there's some proof needed in those types of specific cases, but it will be spelled out very clearly. By and large, for most graduate programs in the US, you do not need a letter proving what is on your resume or CV is true.
So the responsibility is on the students, fine, that whatever you
Yes,
write in your resume should be truthful and correct. So,
exactly.
I mean, at any given point of time, university can check about its correctness. And similar to this question, do we need to submit the certificates of the small competitions if we have mentioned those in the resume? Like athletic competitions or maths olympiad competition or any competition. I mean, you can take
Right.
example of.
So those would not be needed, and I would recommend not submitting them unless perhaps you would be asked to prove or to show something like that. If you're talking about a certificate for software experience or a course that you took, maybe you did not get grades, but you received an achievement certificate for something very academically focused, I would recommend uploading that to your record or sending that to be attached to your documents. It's not going to be required like transcripts because there wasn't a grade awarded, but it does speak to learning specific learning experiences. But if you're talking about in regards to like extracurricular activities or awards won, um, in most cases those are not going to be asked for, and we I would not recommend sending in a lot of extra documentation like that.
Okay, thanks. Now, the next question, I'm clubbing two questions into one, is related to GRE. The one student is asking that the GRE score is not up to the mark. So, should I expand my work experience in the resume or sort of compensate? Or what else can I do? The next, I mean, to stand out, to make the resume stand out if my GRE is low. The second question is similar to this GRE test, that universities have a relaxed GRE criteria for fall 21. It is safe to skip GRE. So I'm clubbing these two questions into one and putting my questions that if someone don't want to take GRE, fine, how can he prepare his resume in such a manner that I mean, of course, looking to the current situation, if he cannot skip GRE, then of course you need to take and must clear. But if he can, because of the university requirement, how can he stand out?
Sure. Great question. So, with GRE, I will say across the board, you need to look at US institutions. You need to look at that program's website. And then maybe you also need further clarity, and you should email and ask the program. Um, but US institutions in the last couple of years, but especially in light of COVID-19, are sort of going away from just always looking at a certain score. And I don't think that it's ever been the case, at least at our institution, where if a student doesn't meet this score, their file is not read. So if I will say first, you should look and see, is GRE required for that program? And if it was in the past, is it still required? Because there have been some leniences in light of the worldwide pandemic. If it is still required and you have concerns about your score, you may also reach out to the program about this as well and see, because it may be that they just want to see some score, but all in all, they're looking at your resume or CV. They're looking at your statement of purpose and references and your grades, your transcripts. So it doesn't become the most vital piece of your application. Or they may say, yes, this is something we still strongly consider. And then, I'm going to apply, go ahead and get my documents in, but maybe I need to think about retesting, do some studying for the GRE and retesting while the application process is going on. I will say, if GRE is not required or you have concerns about your score, the three really important pieces where you have, well, grades, of course, and doing well, your transcripts, you have control of that, but choosing very strategic references that match the criteria, but are those faculty or former advisors or those you've worked with that will speak well and clearly about your experience. The statement of purpose, I talked about it earlier, but statement of purpose is very critical piece of your application. It's sort of like the CV and resume where you don't just want to, write a random 2 pages or 3 pages, but you really want to write it concisely, clearly, and speak to very strategic moments of your experience in life so that it is a draw into your application. And then also your CV and resume. So following the instructions and advice we've given today about proofreading, making it look very neat and visually appearing even on the page, and then making the content using those strong action verbs, making it tell a story but in a very clear way. Those are all ways to make yourself stand out. And a lot of times I've even seen cases where GRE was maybe kind of very poor, but the student did so well on all the other pieces of the application that they ended up being a stronger candidate. It's not in every case, and it's very dependent on where you're applying in the program, but hopefully that's some helpful information there.
Okay, thank you. Is there any format to write a CV? I mean, is there any requirement to write in a certain format?
Um, Yes, I would take a look at, I provided some examples at the end of my presentation, but I would also go online. I think there's a lot of universities that even have on their website or like career part of their website where they have a whole office. Like at Ohio State, we have an office and classes that help students write resumes or CVs. So go online and be researching this because there are very specific things you should include and perhaps should not include, things like pictures of yourself, marital status, things like that for US CVs or resumes are never included. And maybe there's some other things that are making your resume too long or your CV too long that don't need to be on there. Awards that maybe you received in high school, but don't really, there's not space for and don't speak to how you would do as a graduate student so much later in your life. So um, I would I would advise doing some research on university websites and see what type of examples they're providing as well.
Okay. Uh, Next question is about. I mean, someone has a conversational Spanish skill. Fine, she can speak in Spanish, but not academically. And my question, in continuation with this question, is: if we have a skill which we cannot produce by way of certificate, but we still have those skills, how can we? I mean, can we mention it into resume?
Sure. And yes, I think you should. So if you have experience with Microsoft Office Suite and you're familiar with PowerPoint and Excel, and maybe you were never formally trained, but you've just picked up along the way, that's something to include. We use a software called Salesforce. If that's something you have experience with in the business field or something, you should include that. Maybe you've never gone through training and received a certificate, but you've used it on the job. Um, and those are things to include. Um, I'm I'm sorry you gave a specific example there as well that I'm already forgetting. JD.
It's about learning conversational Spanish.
Yes, I'm so sorry. So yes, for that I would put conversational instead of maybe proficient in Spanish. You could put um, uh, proficient in conversational Spanish, or as a skill, if you're just listing them, conversational Spanish. That clearly indicates to me or faculty reading it that Maybe you cannot read a full text in Spanish or get up and expound on it, but if you just need to speak conversationally, or they want you to work with a student maybe on campus that only speaks Spanish, you would be able to relate some information. So I think it's a strong skill you should include. You just kind of indicate it's conversational rather than maybe proficient
Okay.
in that
So
manner.
in any case, if you are going to write that I have a conversational Spanish skill, university can definitely, when you reach on campus, can test your skill by speaking it in Spanish. Simple. Okay. Uh, it would be helpful. Again, you have already answered this before, but uh, again, it be helpful to include a section of the MOOC courses we have done in the resume CV, especially if we miss out on the GPA requirements for the program.
The what courses?
Massive open online courses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, yes. So you're talking about should you include online coursework because you were not able to complete in-person
Yes.
study?
Now,
Yes.
that previous question was probably in relation to the extra courses that we have taken, and this question, as far as I understand, is about compensating because of the current situation. We are taking the courses, MOOC courses, in order to strengthen our GPA.
Yes. So any education experience that you have, especially that attached to grades, you're being awarded in a grade. And just because you're needing to take it online versus in person, if you're taking that course, you should be listing that. Um, in case you don't know, Ohio State students, right at the as this was happening in March, we went completely to online courses. So all of our students, even international that were in country, were taking fully online study. Um, and our faculty or staff worked, I think, really well with students to help them get through the rest of the semester working remotely, and our staff working remotely as well, and through the summer. Now we are back doing a hybrid model, so we're very happy to have students back on campus, but there are still many studying online, and this does not diminish the workload or the level of work that they're doing. If anything, it might be a bit harder at times because of additional technical errors or things like that you might experience. So please continue to include your study and academic work, even if it is online.
Okay. Little funny question, I must say, Emily. If the length of the resume or CV goes beyond as prescribed, is reducing the font size a good solution?
um, no, that is not. That's a good question, though, to ask.
Yeah.
Um, I there have been times, and you need to clearly look at the formatting. We didn't go into maybe all the detail because some of this is research that graduate level students can do, but you wouldn't want. I wouldn't make a font for most. Let me say your font should be a clear font to start with, an Arial or something like this, or Calibri, and typically you don't go below a 12 or 10 size font, because you want to make this big enough for faculty to clearly read. Again, we were
Yeah.
talking about visually appealing. And if I make my font size, 4 and so tiny
Of
that it's
course.
very difficult to read, you could see where that might lead to some even frustration by those reading your
Yeah.
resume. So, not a good idea.
Yeah.
Um, there may be times where maybe to make it one page, you maybe take it from size 12 to 11.5 or 11, but again, that's a text like Arial font, a very clear font and size in
Yeah.
general.
So it's always better to follow the instructions, and it
Yes,
should be
yes.
readable enough. Yeah. Uh,
Yes.
Only a few questions left, Emily.
Sure.
I don't have a publication, but I'm writing one currently. Can that be included, and how?
I would, yes, I would include that. Um, if it's a publication that's going to be included in a specific type of journal as well, I would just indicate, usually you're putting what it is on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side you're putting the date. So if it's not going to be published till November 2020 or January 2021, you could even indicate to be published in, and put the month and year. Um, or if it's a one you're developing, you're not sure if it will be published in a journal, you can put in progress. Um, and especially that's something if you can try and include that on the application. So if maybe it's not meeting the format of the resume or CV very well, um, definitely make sure you include that somewhere on the pieces of your application and mention it to maybe faculty that you're speaking with.
So whatever you're doing, it will have a future impact on your application. Please put those details.
Yes.
Yeah. Last two questions. One is, I have a bachelor's degree in computer science and having 4.5 years of experience in software development. I'm confused as to how to fit all of that in one page for a resume and 2 page for CV without missing out on all the technical details.
Right. Okay. So I think look to the program to which you're applying. Again, if they're saying they just want a one-page resume, you will have to find a way to concisely make that happen. But if you can, 2 pages. Um, I think even with 4.5 years experience plus your education, that should be manageable. Um, I've seen resumes with 20 plus years of work in a field. Um, so you want to speak to your most recent experience first with your work. Well, first your education, of course, but then under that, when you're talking about your work experience in the field, speak to um, what you've done most recently and let what you started out with be the last of that you mentioned. But find a way. I think those action verbs that we talked about, and I believe they provided a link, you can find a way, I think, to creatively use that action, find action verbs that, collaborated, um, words like that, where you can list, you list that verb and then the work, but you can list a couple of things that maybe you would normally make them 2 or 3 separate bullet points. You could find a way to creatively, but not make it too jumbled, put that into one point. So, and I've even done this on my own resume as maybe I gained additional work experience and things were getting too long. I went back and looked at maybe my first work experience. Okay, what is a way I can trim this down to meet this criteria where my resume is not more than 2 pages, but I'm getting to the point of the work that I did, because again, they're just looking at this in a couple of minutes, and if you don't grab their attention quickly with what did you do that really stood out, and what experience are you really gaining along the way, um, they may not have time and they may grow disinterested even if they're reading 5, 6 pages and it continues to go on.
Yeah. So you mentioned the action verbs for resume. We have just shared a file, and participants can download this file. Keep this. Learn these action verbs. Keep this on your data and use appropriately when you prepare your resume. The last question for today's session is from our YouTube live. Uh, just a minute. When describing your academic or professional accomplishments and achievements in your CV, should it be highlighted in bullet points or a brief paragraph? What would be appreciated in an academic CV?
Okay, so when you're talking about accomplishments, um, I think it also depends on how many you're listing. So if you're someone like the previous question where you're kind of running out of space, you do have a lot of accomplishments or awards that have been won, you may want to just strategically uh, but very nicely list the name of those, especially if they're awards that are very known in your field. You want to just clearly list those. If maybe it's just a couple because you are that individual that you said, I don't have any work experience, I'm finishing my bachelor's, I'm not even sure how to make this a strong CV because I just have my education experience so far. but take some time and maybe explain the significance of why you would even include the name of those awards or accomplishments that you've earned along the way. So it kind of depends on space that you have and the number of those experiences as to how detailed I would go in. I would go in about that accomplishment.
Okay. So, Emily, with this very enlightened answers from you, an experienced advisor, uh, we have reached at the close of this session. I would like to extend my my gratitude to you and to all the participants. Thank you so much. I hope that you learned so many important things on this session. Please check with the links for the Education USA fair that we have put over here. Try to register and try to learn more from the advisors and counselors like Emily. Fine. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
attending the
you.
session.
Thank you, JD. Thank you to everyone.
Yeah. With this, we end our session.